Hi there, this is Oscar Davis presenting my original audio effect for the Digital Audio Effects module. My effect is a heterophonic tremolo, which I've created in MATLAB. I've called it the pyramid scheme and designed the interface to kind of reflect that name. It's kind of a light-hearted interface and it's aimed at musicians and producers. You can use it as a standard kind of tremolo for guitars, pianos, that kind of thing, or for sound design uses or ambient musical uses, electronic music. In this video, I'll just explain the motivation, inspiration behind it. I'll talk about the technical implementation, and then I'll just give some examples with some sounds. So the inspiration behind this effect is the gamelan, which is an Indonesian percussion ensemble, which is pictured here. And the texture of gamelan music is heterophonic generally, and that means basically that you have one melody line that's played simultaneously by different parts, but it is like embellished and changed by each part. So in the gamelan you have the bass instruments like these gongs here, and they play a bass line that is kind of slow. It's a big long cycle basically, and then on top of that you have the intermediate size instruments, which you can see here and over here, and they play the same melody but it's embellished and sped up on top of that. And on top of that you have the smaller instruments, you can see like these here and these here, and they play the same melody again, but it's even faster and more embellishments on top, and it kind of works in these cycles that overlap each other and stuff. And it's lovely music. So I wanted to take that kind of concept of a heterophonic texture and put it into a tremolo effect. So here's a block diagram of the system. I'll just explain the overall kind of concept behind the implementation. So you've got the audio input here, and you've got a crossover, which splits it into lows, mids, and highs. And then each band of audio is multiplied by an LFO, and that creates an independent sort of tremolo for each band, but they're all in sync. And then you have the speed control here, which controls the first LFO, then the value is times by 2, and controls the second LFO, so that's going at double the speed of this, and then it's times by 2 again, and controls the third LFO, so that's going at 4 times the speed of the original. Or depending on settings on the effect, it can actually be 3 and 6, but you understand the idea basically of the same control being increased for the other bands, and then they're summed back together for the output. So here I've got a prototype of the effect that I've made in pure data. So start off with just the lows. Pretty standard white noise through a low pass and then into a tremolo. Then the mids, you can hear that's going at twice the speed. And then the highs 4 times. So I'll just talk you through the layout and the controls now that you understand how the effect works. So you've got on this bottom level here, you've got speed, you've got depth, and you've got dry wet. And this bottom set of controls is a set of master controls. So, for example, the triplet affects both of the upper bands, and the depth affects all the LFOs that are the same amount. So speed is just the speed of the LFOs as we've shown before. The depth is, so if you think of an LFO as being oscillations between 0 and 1, which is how this is implemented, the depth basically raises that bottom the lower bound, so it will now. So if the depth is at 1, then the range is 1, so it goes from 0 to 1. If you were to reduce the depth to, let's say, 0.5, then the LFOs now oscillate between 1 and 0.5, and if you put it down to 0, there's no oscillation because it's just between 1 and 1. Basically, the depth is 0. Then you've got dry wet, which is very simple, just a mix between the raw input signal and the affected signal from the effect. So if you want to have a more subtle effect, you can use that. Then you have flip switch here, which basically flips the pyramid on its head. So instead of being crotchets, quavers, semiquavers, it's semiquavers, quavers, crotchets. So basically the low notes instead of going slowly, they're going fast, and the high notes the other way around. And the triplets and duplets switch just changes it so that each band, instead of being multiplied by 2 and 4, it's multiplied by 3 and 6. That switch there. Then you've got a mixer section just to, you can play with how much of each band you have, and then just an output on the top. Okay, so now I'll just show the effect in action. So we'll start off with another noise example, but this is a slightly more complex input. So you can hear this is just some kind of French humming or something like that, which you might want to use for the background in a film. Say there's a scene taking place in a train or something like that. You see, this is quite a static, non-rhythmic sound. If we add in the effect, you can hear that it adds a lot more rhythmic interest to the sound, and also depth in the fact that the highs are so much more different from the lows. You can really hear them standing out from each other, and you can sort of play with it, get really different tones just from one quite simple input. Relatively speaking, you can change the speed. Flip it upside down. That's a nice little thing to hear. Now this sounds more, because the lows are pulsing much faster now, this sounds more like some kind of engine running with I don't know, wind on the outside as the highs. You can even take out the lows, and it might sound more like a different kind of machinery there. You can change the depth. Here we've got an example with this is a modular synth creating kind of church organ type of sound. So yeah, you can hear this. Again, it's quite static. There's not that much interest or separation between the bass and the highs. You can turn this on, suddenly it's much more kind of open, there's much more rhythm to it. So you could use this for a big dramatic chord, at the apex of a song, or it could be kind of sound design for like a creative sound design used for like a spaceship in a sci-fi thing, or it could be just a musical effect with a song. Then this is like a MIDI piano roll kind of thing, of like a bit of ragtime piano. This is just the raw signal. It's just a very basic piano sample, a bit dull. What we can do is add in the tremolo. This is a bit more of a subtle use of it. Put a bit of reverb in. You could also add a vibrato on top, maybe take some of more of the highs out. So you can get some interesting, slightly more subtle effects there. And finally, no effect is complete without trying out on a guitar. So I've got a little sample here of some guitar playing. Let's just get the right button there. So this is the dry signal. Just some nice little guitar chords. And then I'll turn on the effect. So this is quite an obvious implementation of it. You might want a slightly more warm guitar sound. Which is a bit subtler. Yeah, I think that's kind of shown off everything that I wanted to with my effect. Thanks for watching the presentation.